I was lying on my kitchen floor, watching my own blood pool beneath me from the deep gash in my thigh. The broken glass shelf had sliced me open like a knife through butter. My phone sat just inches away, but I couldn't reach it. Celebration sounds echoed from the living room, where my parents were toasting my brother Danny's law school graduation. I called for help, my voice weak and desperate. My father Gerald shouted back, "Stop being dramatic, Felix." My mother Patricia added, "Not now. Danny's friends are here." I watched the crimson puddle grow wider. 3 hours earlier, I had been working at my computer in the basement apartment I rented from my parents. The irony wasn't lost on me that at 26, I was paying $600 a month to live beneath people who treated me like an unwanted tenant rather than their son. My graphic design business was finally starting to gain traction. I had built a small but steady client base, creating logos and marketing materials for local businesses in our Ohio town. The basement setup wasn't glamorous, but it gave me the space I needed for my equipment and the quiet to focus on my work. Danny, my 28-year-old brother, had graduated summa cum laude from Ohio State Law School that morning. The house buzzed with preparation for his celebration party. My mother, Patricia, a real estate agent who prided herself on appearances, had been cooking for days. My father, Gerald, an insurance adjuster who measured success only in dollars and prestige, kept bragging to anyone who would listen about his lawyer son. I had installed new shelving earlier that week to organize my design supplies better. The project required heavy-duty brackets to support the weight of my equipment and portfolio binders. I had specifically purchased reinforced steel brackets rated for 75 pounds, but when I went to hang the shelf, my father insisted I use some brackets he had lying around in the garage. "No point wasting money on fancy hardware," Gerald had said, waving dismissively at my new brackets. These work just fine. The celebration upstairs grew louder as guests arrived. I could hear the familiar voices of family friends, Danny's law school classmates, and various relatives who had driven in for the occasion. Through the thin ceiling, every word of praise for Danny's accomplishments filtered down to my workspace. "Danny's going to make partner before he's 35, someone predicted. "Such a bright young man," another voice agreed. Gerald and Patricia must be so proud. I had been reaching for a portfolio binder when the shelf collapsed. The cheap, corroded brackets my father provided gave way instantly, sending the heavy wooden shelf crashing down. As I tried to jump back, a jagged piece of broken glass sliced through my jeans and deep into my thigh muscle. The pain hit me like lightning, sharp and overwhelming. Blood immediately began flowing from the wound, soaking through my torn jeans and pooling on the concrete floor. I pressed my hands against the cut, trying to stem the bleeding, but it was too deep and too wide. "Help!" I shouted toward the ceiling. "I need help!" The music upstairs continued without pause. Laughter and conversation carried on as if nothing had happened. That's when I heard my mother's voice clearly through the heating vent, speaking to someone on speakerphone. "Danny, honey, we've been handling that situation just like you asked," she said. "Every time someone calls asking about graphic design work, we tell them Felix is booked solid and recommend that nice firm downtown instead." My blood chilled for reasons beyond the injury. I pressed my ear closer to the vent, ignoring the throbbing pain in my leg. "I know it seems harsh," Danny's voice crackled through the phone speaker, "but having a struggling artist in the family doesn't exactly help my professional image. When I start interviewing with the big law firms, they do background checks on everything, including family members." "Of course, sweetheart," Patricia cooed. "We understand completely. Your career comes first. Felix will figure something out eventually. Besides," Gerald's voice joined the conversation, "maybe if he got a real job instead of playing around with computers all day, he wouldn't need our help." The betrayal cut deeper than the glass had. For months, I had wondered why my business seemed to plateau just when it should have been growing. Potential clients had stopped calling. Referrals had dried up. I had blamed the economy, competition, my own inadequate marketing skills. Never once did I imagine my own parents were sabotaging me. I looked down at my hands, now slick with blood, and realized the physical wound was nothing compared to what I had just discovered. My family hadn't just been indifferent to my success. They had been actively working against it. "Help," I called again, my voice weaker now. "Please." "I'm hurt." My mother's voice drifted down again, this time addressing the party guests. "Felix is just being dramatic again. You know how he gets when Danny achieves something." 20 minutes had passed since the accident, and the bleeding hadn't stopped. My makeshift pressure bandage, torn from an old t-shirt, was completely soaked through. Dizziness crept in at the edges of my vision, and my hands felt cold and clammy. I forced myself to examine the collapsed shelf more carefully. Something about those brackets bothered me beyond their obvious failure. Dragging myself closer, I could see that while they appeared to be painted black like new hardware, the paint was chipped and flaking. Underneath, the metal showed deep rust and corrosion. These weren't just old brackets. They were dangerously deteriorated ones that had been painted over to hide their condition. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and took photos of the failed mounting points. The screws had pulled right through the corroded metal, leaving jagged holes where solid steel should have been. No competent person would ever use these brackets for anything heavier than a picture frame. Gerald knew exactly what he was doing. Through the heating vents, the party continued in full swing. I could hear Danny giving an impromptu speech to the assembled guests. "I want to thank everyone for being here today." His voice carried clearly through the ductwork. "Law school was the hardest thing I've ever done. But having the unwavering support of my family made all the difference. My parents sacrificed so much to make this possible." Applause erupted upstairs. Someone called out, "Speech from the parents." Patricia's voice followed, syrupy sweet, with false modesty. "We just knew Danny was destined for greatness from the time he was little. Some children are born leaders, born achievers. We simply recognized that and invested accordingly." "That's right," Gerald added. "Patricia and I always believed in putting our resources where they would do the most good. We're not wealthy people, but we know how to prioritize what matters." More applause, more congratulations. I heard the clink of glasses and the murmur of impressed guests discussing Danny's bright future. "Where's your other son tonight?" I heard my Aunt Martha ask. "Felix, isn't it?" The brief pause that followed felt loaded with tension, even from my position bleeding on the basement floor. "Oh, Felix is out with friends," Patricia lied smoothly. "You know how young people are. Always busy with their own social lives. Such a shame he couldn't be here for his brother's big day," Martha continued. "Doesn't he live here with you?" "Temporarily," Gerald jumped in. "Just until he gets his act together and finds some direction in life. Not everyone can be as focused as Danny." I closed my eyes, fighting back waves of nausea that I couldn't tell were from blood loss or emotional devastation. My own parents were actively erasing my existence from their narrative, painting me as an irresponsible burden while I lay dying in their basement. "Actually, where is Felix?" Danny's voice cut through the conversation upstairs. Even through the distortion of the heating system, I could hear genuine concern. I wanted to thank him for helping with my graduation party setup yesterday. "Felix is fine." Gerald's voice carried an edge of irritation. "He's just jealous of your success and didn't want to be around the celebration. You know how he gets." That was the moment I realized I could die here. My parents wouldn't check on me until long after the party ended, if at all. By then, I might have bled out completely. The wound in my thigh was deeper than I had initially thought, and the blood loss was making me increasingly weak and confused. I had to save myself, because no one else would. Using my phone's flashlight, I examined the wound more carefully. The glass had sliced through muscle, but hadn't hit any major arteries, or I would already be dead. However, it needed immediate medical attention and proper sutures to prevent infection and further blood loss. I began dragging myself across the basement floor toward the stairs, leaving a trail of blood behind me. Each movement sent fresh waves of pain through my leg, but staying put meant certain death. The wooden steps proved nearly impossible to navigate with my injured leg, but desperation gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. I pulled myself up one step at a time, gripping the handrail and using my good leg to push. By the time I reached the basement door, my vision was starting to blur around the edges. I could hear the party in full swing just beyond the thin wall that separated my world from theirs. I turned the doorknob and pushed the door open, collapsing immediately onto the kitchen floor of the main house. The kitchen tiles felt cold against my cheek as I lay there, bleeding and gasping. The celebration sounds that had been muffled in the basement now surrounded me in full volume. Laughter, conversation, and clinking glasses created a surreal soundtrack to my medical emergency. "Help," I managed to call out, though my voice came out as barely more than a whisper. I tried to pull myself toward the living room doorway, but my strength was nearly gone. The blood trail I left behind told the story of my desperate journey from the basement to this moment. "Help me," I tried again, louder this time. A woman's scream pierced the party atmosphere. Mrs. Henderson, our next-door neighbor, had come into the kitchen looking for the bathroom and found me collapsed on the floor. "Oh my God, Gerald, Patricia, get in here now." The celebration sound stopped abruptly. Footsteps rushed toward the kitchen, and suddenly I was surrounded by concerned faces. Danny pushed through the crowd and dropped to his knees beside me. "Felix, what happened? You're bleeding everywhere." Before I could answer, my parents appeared in the kitchen doorway. Instead of the shock and concern I expected, I saw something that chilled me more than the blood loss: annoyance. "What is this about?" Patricia demanded, looking more worried about her party than her injured son. "He's hurt badly," Danny said, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling 911. "Wait." Gerald stepped forward, his voice sharp with authority. "Let's not be hasty. Felix is always dramatic about these things. It's probably just a scratch." Mrs. Henderson looked at my parents with undisguised shock. "A scratch? He's lost a tremendous amount of blood. Look at this trail leading from your basement." "I'll handle this," Patricia said firmly, moving toward me. "Felix, get up. You're ruining Danny's graduation party." But Danny was already on the phone with emergency services, ignoring his parents' protests. "I need an ambulance at 47 Maple Street. My brother has a severe laceration and has lost a lot of blood. Please hurry." Other party guests had gathered in the kitchen doorway, witnessing the bizarre family dynamics playing out before them. I could see the confusion and judgment in their faces as they watched my parents prioritize party management over their injured son. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes, though it felt like hours. The lead EMT, a man named James who looked to be in his 40s, immediately took control of the situation. "Everyone back, please. Give us room to work." James knelt beside me and began his assessment. "What's your name?" "Felix," I managed. "Okay, Felix. Can you tell me what happened?" As I explained about the shelf collapse, James worked efficiently to control the bleeding and assess the damage. His partner, Sarah, prepared supplies and communicated with the hospital. "This is going to need surgery," James told me quietly. "You've lost a significant amount of blood, and this wound needs proper suturing." As they prepared to move me to the stretcher, James did something unexpected. He leaned closer and spoke in a low voice that only I could hear. "Felix, this isn't the first time we've been called to this address." I looked at him with confusion through my pain-induced haze. "Your sister Emma," he continued. "She called us twice before her accident 3 years ago. Reported concerning incidents at home. We have records." The words hit me like a physical blow. Emma, my younger sister, had died in a car accident when she was 21. She had been driving home from her job at the local veterinary clinic when she lost control of her car on a rainy night and hit a tree. "Emma called you?" I whispered. James nodded grimly. "Twice. once for what she described as suspicious food poisoning after a family dinner. Once for injuries she claimed were from a fall downstairs, but which looked inconsistent with her story. As the paramedics loaded me onto the stretcher, I caught sight of my parents. Gerald was already ushering guests back toward the living room, apologizing for the disruption. Patricia was on her hands and knees, scrubbing my blood from the kitchen floor with bleach. Danny climbed into the ambulance with me, despite his parents' protests that he should stay with his guests. "I'm not leaving him," Danny said firmly, showing more backbone than I had ever seen from him. During the ambulance ride, James continued to share what he knew. "Your sister was documenting things," he said while monitoring my vital signs. "She mentioned feeling unsafe at home, said there was a pattern of accidents that didn't seem accidental." "What kind of accidents?" Danny asked from his seat beside my stretcher. James looked between us, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "Falls, food poisoning, car trouble that seemed suspicious. She was scared enough to call us, but never followed through with formal reports. At the hospital, I received 43 stitches and 2 units of blood to replace what I had lost. The emergency room doctor, Dr. Martinez, explained that I had come very close to requiring emergency surgery. "A few more inches to the left, and this would have hit your femoral artery," she said. "You're lucky to be alive." While I recovered in the hospital bed, Danny sat beside me with a expression I had never seen before. Guilt, mixed with growing understanding, and something else that looked like determination. "Felix," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something about Mom and Dad. Something I should have told you years ago." The next morning, Danny arrived at my hospital room, carrying a cardboard box that looked like it had been hidden away for years. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept. "The nurse said you're being discharged this afternoon," he said, setting the box on the bedside table. "You can't go back to the house." "Not yet." My friend Marcus had already offered his spare room, and I had gratefully accepted. The thought of returning to my parents' basement filled me with a combination of fear and rage I couldn't quite process. "What's in the box?" I asked. Danny's hands shook slightly as he opened it. "Emma's things. Mom and Dad were going to throw these away after the funeral, but I saved them. I thought someday you might want to have them, but now." He trailed off, pulling out a leather journal. "Now I think there's something you need to see." The journal was Emma's handwriting, neat and careful the way she had always been. Danny opened it to a page marked with a yellow sticky note. "Read this entry from 6 months before she died," he said. I took the journal with trembling hands and read, November 15th. "It happened again today. I confronted Mom and Dad about the money missing from my savings account. The $300 I had saved for my veterinary technician certification just disappeared. When I asked about it, Dad got that look in his eyes and Mom started her gaslighting routine. They said I must have spent it and forgotten, that I'm irresponsible with money. But I know I didn't spend it. I know they took it for Danny's law school application fees. They think I don't pay attention, but I see the bank statements when they leave them out. All my money goes to Danny's future. All of it." I looked up at Danny, who was staring at the floor. "Keep reading," he said quietly. December 3rd. "Found out today that Mom has been intercepting my mail from the veterinary program. 3 acceptance letters that I never saw. She threw them away because she said the family can't afford to have 2 children in school at the same time. Danny's law school takes priority. Always Danny. Emma's dreams don't matter because they don't reflect well on the family image." December 20th. Dad tampered with my car again. The brake fluid was nearly empty when I checked it yesterday, but I had just had the car serviced. When I confronted him, he said I must be imagining things, that I'm paranoid and need to see a therapist. But I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the journal. Danny took it from me and continued reading. January 8th. I called the paramedics today after getting violently ill from dinner. Mom made my favorite pasta. Said it was a special treat just for me. But something was wrong with it. I was throwing up for hours and felt like I was dying. The EMT, James, was really kind. He asked if this had happened before, and I told him about the car problems and the money. He gave me his card and said to call if I ever felt unsafe. February 14th, Valentine's Day. Mom and Dad gave Danny $500 for a weekend trip with his girlfriend. When I asked if I could have $50 for my certification exam fee, Mom said the family couldn't afford it. $50. After they just gave Danny 10 times that amount for a vacation. I'm starting to understand that I don't matter to them at all. I'm just taking up space until Danny achieves enough success for the whole family. Danny closed the journal and looked at me with tears in his eyes. There are dozens of entries like this, Felix. Months of documentation about how they were treating her. Financial manipulation, emotional abuse, and what looks like deliberate sabotage. Why didn't you do anything? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Because I was benefiting from it, he said honestly. Every dollar they took from Emma, every opportunity they denied you, it all went toward making my life easier. I told myself I didn't know how bad it was. But that's not true. I knew. I just didn't want to see it. Danny pulled out his phone and showed me a banking app. This morning I logged into the joint account Mom set up for my law school expenses. Felix, there's over $37,000 in there that I can trace back to payments you've made for rent, utilities, and other expenses over the past 5 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. $37,000. Money I had paid, thinking I was contributing to household expenses. Money that had actually been funneled into Danny's education fund. They've been stealing from me, I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. Not just stealing, Danny corrected. Systematically defrauding you while making you feel like a burden for living in their house. He pulled out more papers from the box. Bank statements, credit card applications, loan documents. Felix, they've been using your credit history to secure loans for my education. Look at this. The credit application was clearly in my name, with my social security number, but with Danny listed as the beneficiary for educational expenses. My signature had been forged. This is identity theft, I said. It's worse than that, Danny replied. Look at the address they used for your residence. I looked closer and saw they had listed me as living in a different state entirely, making it nearly impossible for me to discover these applications or receive any correspondence about them. How long has this been going on? Danny pulled out a manila folder filled with similar documents. Based on what I've found so far, at least 5 years. Maybe longer. My phone rang. It was Marcus, calling to check on me. Felix, how are you feeling? Are you still getting discharged today? Yes, I said. And Marcus, I need to ask you a favor. I need someone to witness what Danny's showing me right now. Can you come to the hospital? Of course. I'll be there in 20 minutes. While we waited for Marcus, Danny pulled out his laptop. There's something else, Felix. I logged into Mom's social media accounts this morning. He turned the screen toward me. Look at what she's been telling people about our family situation. The Facebook posts painted a picture that bore no resemblance to reality. Post after post showed expensive gifts we had bought for Danny, family dinners where I was conspicuously absent, and constant bragging about supporting their successful son through law school. One post from 3 months ago read, "So proud of our Danny. Gerald and I have been able to support his law school dreams because our older son Felix still lives at home and contributes to household expenses. It takes a whole family working together to achieve success." The comments were filled with praise for their family values and sacrifice. Person after person congratulated them on raising such a generous, family-oriented older son who was supporting his brother's education. They had turned my exploitation into a public relations campaign about their own generosity. When Marcus arrived, Danny walked him through everything we had discovered. Marcus, who worked as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm, immediately grasped the severity of what we were looking at. Felix, this isn't just family dysfunction, Marcus said grimly. This is criminal fraud. On multiple levels. Identity theft, wire fraud, tax evasion, elder abuse if they're doing this to other people. Elder abuse? I asked. Marcus nodded. If your parents are running these kinds of financial scams on their own children, they're probably doing it to other vulnerable people too. Your mom's a real estate agent, right? She has access to elderly clients who might be easy targets for financial manipulation. Danny was already on his phone, calling someone. Professor Thompson? It's Danny Lawson from your family law seminar. I need to ask about representing a family member in a potential fraud case involving my parents. Can we meet today? As Danny arranged the meeting, I stared at Emma's journal, lying open on the hospital bed. Her words seemed to echo across the 3 years since her death, warning me about dangers I had been too naive to see. Danny, I said quietly, what if Emma's car accident wasn't an accident? Danny stopped mid-conversation and looked at me with an expression that suggested the same thought had occurred to him. We're going to find out, he said. We're going to find out everything. Professor Margaret Thompson's office in the law school's family practice clinic felt like a sanctuary compared to the chaos of the past 24 hours. Margaret, a sharp woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes, listened intently as Danny and I laid out our evidence. This is one of the most systematic cases of familial financial abuse I've encountered, she said, reviewing the bank statements and credit applications. The scope of manipulation here goes far beyond typical family dysfunction. Margaret had agreed to represent me pro bono through the law school's clinic, with Danny assisting as a student attorney under her supervision. The irony wasn't lost on any of us that Danny was using his legal education to fight the very people who had funded it through fraud. Felix, I need you to understand something, Margaret said. What we're looking at here has the potential for serious criminal charges against your parents. Are you prepared for that possibility? I thought about Emma's journal entries, about years of financial manipulation, about lying on a basement floor while they celebrated. Yes, I said without hesitation. Good. Because we're going to need to be thorough. Danny, start pulling together every document you can find. Felix, I want you to compile a timeline of every suspicious incident you can remember, no matter how small. Over the next 3 days, working from Marcus's apartment while I recovered, we built a case that shocked even Margaret with its scope and sophistication. The financial forensics revealed that my parents had been operating what amounted to a family Ponzi scheme. They had taken out multiple loans using my credit, Daniel's credit, and even Emma's credit after her death. They had been paying the minimum on these loans using money they collected from me as rent, and from Daniel as contributions to household expenses. But the most devastating discovery came when we examined their tax returns. Look at this, Margaret said, pointing to a series of dependency claims. They've been claiming you as a dependent for the past 5 years, while simultaneously charging you market-rate rent and requiring you to pay for your own food, utilities, and expenses. That's tax fraud, Danny said. It gets worse, Margaret continued. They've also been claiming educational tax credits for your supposed enrollment in community college classes that you never took. The paper trail showed a level of premeditation that was breathtaking in its audacity. My parents hadn't just been neglectful or favoritistic. They had been running a criminal enterprise using their own children as unwitting victims. Margaret, I said. My friend Marcus suggested they might be doing this to other people too. My mother's a real estate agent. Would she have access to vulnerable clients? Margaret's expression grew even more serious. That's something we need to investigate immediately. If they're targeting elderly clients or other vulnerable populations, this becomes a much larger case. Danny volunteered to research our mother's real estate transactions over the past 5 years. What he found made us all sick. She's been specializing in helping elderly clients downsize and move into assisted living facilities, Danny reported. But look at these transaction records. In every single case, the selling price is significantly below market value. Margaret reviewed the real estate records Danny had pulled from public databases. This suggests she's been undervaluing properties to create opportunities for quick sales to preferred buyers, Margaret said. If she's getting kickbacks from the buyers or steering elderly clients toward bad deals for personal gain, that's elder abuse and real estate fraud. There's more, Danny said grimly. I found 3 different bank accounts in Mom's name that show regular deposits that don't match her real estate commissions. The amounts and timing suggest she's been getting payments for financial services that real estate agents aren't licensed to provide. I felt sick as the scope of my parents' crimes became clear. This wasn't just about stealing from their own children. They had been preying on vulnerable elderly people, using Patricia's real estate license to gain access to victims and Gerald's insurance background to manipulate their financial decisions. We need to report this to the State Attorney General's office, Margaret said. This is organized criminal activity, targeting protected populations. But before we could take any action, Danny received a call that changed everything. Hello, Danny. This is your father. Your mother and I need to speak with you immediately. We know what you and your brother are up to. And if you don't stop this nonsense right now, we're going to make sure your law career is over before it starts. Danny put the phone on speaker so Margaret and I could hear. We have friends in the legal community, Gerald continued. People who can make sure you never pass the bar exam. We've invested too much in your future to let Felix destroy it with his delusions. Dad, Felix nearly died because of that shelf you tampered with, Danny said, his voice steady, despite the threat. That's ridiculous, Patricia's voice joined the call. That shelf failed because Felix used it improperly. We're not responsible for his carelessness. We have photos of the corroded brackets, Danny said. We know you deliberately used damaged hardware. The line went quiet for a long moment. You ungrateful little brat. Gerald's voice turned cold. After everything we've done for you, you're going to side with that failure of a brother over the people who made your success possible? Felix isn't a failure, Danny said firmly. And what you've done isn't support. It's criminal fraud. Criminal fraud? Patricia laughed. But there was an edge of hysteria to it. We're your parents. Everything we did was for this family's success. If Felix can't appreciate the sacrifices we made to ensure Danny's future, that's his problem. Margaret leaned forward and spoke into the phone. Mr. and Mrs. Lawson, this is Professor Margaret Thompson from the Ohio State University College of Law. I'm representing Felix in this matter, and I'm advising you that anything you say on this call may be used as evidence in legal proceedings. The line went dead immediately. Margaret looked at Danny and me with a expression that mixed professional satisfaction with personal sadness. Well, she said, they just gave us everything we need to prove conscious intent and willful criminal activity. That call, combined with the documentary evidence, gives us a rock-solid case. What happens now? I asked. Now we take this to the district attorney's office and let them decide what charges to file. But Felix, I want you to be prepared for the possibility that your parents are going to fight this aggressively. They've already threatened Danny's career, and they're going to get more desperate as the walls close in. Danny reached over and squeezed my shoulder. Whatever happens, he said, I'm with you. I should have done this years ago when Emma was documenting the abuse. I failed her, but I'm not going to fail you. As we prepared to leave Margaret's office, she handed me a business card. This is for Dr. Sarah Chen, she said. Then she caught herself. I'm sorry, Dr. Sarah Williams. She specializes in therapy for victims of family trauma and financial abuse. What you've been through is going to require professional support to process. I pocketed the card, knowing I would need all the help I could get for what was coming next. That evening, as Danny and I sat in Marcus's living room planning our next steps, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Felix? This is James, the paramedic who treated you the other night. I hope you don't mind that I got your number from the hospital records, but there's something I think you need to know. Of course, I said, putting the phone on speaker. I've been thinking about what I told you regarding your sister Emma. After our call ended, I pulled our complete records from those incidents. There's something else Emma told my partner that didn't make it into the official report. What was it? She said she had been documenting everything her parents were doing, not just to her but to other people. She mentioned elderly clients of your mother's real estate business. She was planning to report it all to the authorities, but she was waiting until she had enough evidence to make sure they couldn't cover it up. My blood ran cold. James. Exactly when did Emma tell you this? The last time we responded to your address. 3 days before her car accident. Danny and I looked at each other with growing horror. Emma wasn't just being abused, I said quietly. She was going to expose them. And then, she died in a convenient accident, Danny added. James's voice was grim. Felix, you might want to consider requesting an investigation into your sister's death, because based on what you've told me about your parents' criminal activities, that car accident is looking a lot less accidental. The district attorney's office moved faster than any of us expected. Within 48 hours of our meeting, Detective Lisa Rodriguez from the Economic Crimes Unit was sitting in Margaret's office reviewing our evidence. We've been investigating suspicious real estate transactions in this area for 6 months, Detective Rodriguez said. Your parents' names have come up multiple times in connection with elderly victims who were financially exploited. She opened a thick file folder and spread out documents across Margaret's desk. Mrs. Henderson, age 78, sold her house for $40,000 below market value, with your mother as the agent. Mr. Tent Foster, 81, was talked into a reverse mortgage that left him homeless within 6 months. Mrs. Chen. She paused and looked at us apologetically. Mrs. Williams, age 75, signed over power of attorney to your father for insurance claims that turned out to be fraudulent. The scope of victims was staggering. 12 elderly clients over the past 3 years, all manipulated into financial decisions that benefited my parents while destroying their own economic security. We have enough evidence to arrest them tonight, Detective Rodriguez said. But I have a proposition for you. She leaned forward, her expression intense. We want to give them an opportunity to confess and provide information about other potential victims. Sometimes guilty parties reveal more when they think they're in control of the conversation. What are you suggesting? Margaret asked. A recorded confrontation. Felix, you and Danny arranged to meet your parents somewhere public but quiet. We'll wire you for sound and have backup nearby. Let them talk. Let them explain themselves. People who commit these kinds of crimes often can't resist justifying their actions when confronted. The plan was both terrifying and appealing. Part of me wanted to face my parents with the truth and hear them try to explain years of systematic abuse. Another part of me just wanted them arrested and out of my life forever. I'll do it, I said. 2 days later, I called my parents and asked to meet them for dinner at Riverside Restaurant, a quiet family establishment where they often took out-of-town relatives. I told them I wanted to discuss our family situation and find a path forward. Finally. Coming to your senses, Gerald said approvingly. It's about time you realized that family comes first. Detective Rodriguez and her team set up the recording equipment in Marcus's apartment that afternoon. The wire was smaller than I expected, barely noticeable under my shirt. Remember, Detective Rodriguez said as she tested the audio levels, let them do the talking. Ask open-ended questions and give them space to explain themselves. Don't directly accuse them of crimes. Just express confusion and ask for clarification. Danny would be at the restaurant as backup, sitting at a different table but close enough to intervene if things went badly. Detective Rodriguez and 2 other officers would be monitoring the conversation from a van in the parking lot. When I arrived at Riverside Restaurant, my parents were already seated in a corner booth, looking like the picture of respectable middle-class stability. Patricia wore her best dress and jewelry. Gerald had on his good suit. They looked like people celebrating a special occasion, not defendants in a criminal investigation. Felix. Patricia stood and hugged me, as if nothing had happened. You look much better. "How's your leg healing?" "It's fine," I said, settling into the booth across from them. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." "Of course, sweetheart," she said. "We're family. We work things out." Gerald signaled the waitress and ordered drinks for all of us without asking what I wanted. Even in this moment, he needed to maintain control. "Felix," he said. Once the waitress left, "Your mother and I have been talking, and we think this whole situation has been blown out of proportion. You had an accident. You got medical treatment. Everything worked out fine. Dad, I nearly died on the basement floor while you were celebrating Danny's graduation." "Now, that's dramatic language," Patricia interjected. "You had a cut that required stitches. People get hurt all the time. It doesn't mean anyone did anything wrong. But the brackets you gave me for the shelf were corroded and dangerous," I said. "You had to know they would fail." Gerald's face darkened slightly, but his voice remained calm. "Felix, I've been dealing with hardware and construction issues my whole career in insurance. Those brackets were fine for the load you put on them. If they failed, it's because you overloaded the shelf or installed it improperly. I documented the failure points, Dad. The metal was completely corroded through. Documentation can be manipulated," he said dismissively. "Anyone can take photos and claim they show whatever they want them to show." Patricia reached across the table and patted my hand in a gesture that would have looked maternal to outside observers. "Honey, we understand you're upset about the accident, but you can't blame other people for your own carelessness. That's not how responsible adults handle problems." I took a deep breath and shifted the conversation. "I've been reviewing my financial situation while I was recovering, and I have some questions about the rent and expenses I've been paying you." "Questions?" Gerald's voice carried a warning edge. "I calculated that I've paid you over $40,000 in rent and expenses over the past 5 years. That seems like a lot for a basement apartment." Patricia and Gerald exchanged a quick glance. "Felix," Patricia said carefully, "supporting a household is expensive. You're not just renting a room. We've been providing you with food, utilities, internet, family support, emotional guidance. What you've contributed barely covers the actual cost of having you in the house. But I've been buying my own food and paying for my own car insurance and cell phone," I pointed out. "You've bought some groceries," Gerald corrected. "But you've been eating family dinners, using our electricity for your computer equipment, taking advantage of our homeowner's insurance, benefiting from the maintenance and upkeep we do on the property. Besides," Patricia added, "we've been using that money to help support Danny's education, which benefits the whole family. When Danny becomes successful, it raises everyone's status. That's called thinking strategically about family resources." The casual admission hit me like a physical blow, even though I had expected it. "So you've been taking my rent money and giving it to Danny?" "We've been investing family resources where they'll do the most good," Gerald said firmly. "Danny has the potential to be a major success. He'll be able to support all of us eventually, including you when you get too old to work that little computer hobby of yours." "What about my graphic design business?" "I've been trying to build a client base, but it seems like potential customers stop calling." Another exchanged glance between my parents. "Felix," Patricia said, with exaggerated patience, "you have to understand that running a business out of our house reflects on our family reputation. When people call asking about graphic design services, we have to be careful about what kind of message that sends about our household." "So you've been screening my business calls?" "We've been protecting the family image," Gerald said. "If you want to run a business, you need to get your own place and your own phone line. You can't expect to use our home and our reputation as your business address. But you've been telling people that my rent payments are helping support Danny's education. Doesn't that contradict the idea that I'm a burden on the family?" The question seemed to catch them off guard. Patricia's smile became strained. "Felix, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. We've been helping you by giving you an affordable place to live while you figure out your career path. At the same time, We've been strategic about using family resources to invest in Danny's future. These aren't contradictory things. What about the credit applications that were filled out in my name? The temperature at the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. Gerald's face hardened. What credit applications? The ones for Danny's educational loans. With my name and social security number, but listing a different address, so I wouldn't receive the paperwork. Patricia looked genuinely confused, but Gerald's expression had shifted into something I had never seen before. Cold calculation, mixed with barely controlled anger. Felix, I think you're confused about some paperwork you might have seen. Families help each other with financial applications all the time. It's called being supportive. So you did use my credit for Danny's loans? I used family resources to help family members, Gerald said through gritted teeth. That's what parents do. We make strategic decisions about how to optimize everyone's opportunities. But using someone's credit without their knowledge is identity theft, I said. Gerald's mask finally slipped completely. Identity theft? His voice rose enough that other diners turned to look. You ungrateful little parasite. We have spent years trying to make something of you. And this is how you repay us? By accusing us of crimes? Gerald, Patricia hissed. Keep your voice down. But Gerald was past caring about appearances. No, Patricia. I'm tired of tiptoeing around his feelings. Felix has been a disappointment since the day he was born. We tried to help him, tried to give him direction, tried to make him useful to this family. And instead of being grateful, he wants to play victim and blame us for his failures. I'm not playing victim, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I'm trying to understand why my own parents have been systematically stealing from me and sabotaging my business. Stealing. Gerald laughed harshly. You want to talk about stealing? You've been stealing opportunities from Danny. Your entire life. Every dollar we spend on you is a dollar that could have gone toward his future. Every minute we waste managing your problems is time we could have spent helping him succeed. Patricia was frantically trying to signal Gerald to stop talking, but he was on a roll. You think you deserve the same investment as Danny? You think your little computer hobby is as valuable as his law degree? You're delusional, Felix. You always have been. What about Emma? I asked quietly. The question stopped Gerald mid-rant. Patricia went pale. What about Emma? Patricia asked carefully. Was she stealing opportunities from Danny too? Is that why she had so many accidents before she died? How dare you? Patricia whispered. Emma died in a tragic accident. How dare you suggest otherwise? An accident that happened 3 days after she told the paramedics she was going to report you to the authorities for financial abuse. The silence that followed was deafening. Gerald and Patricia stared at me with expressions that confirmed everything I needed to know. You're insane, Gerald finally said. Completely delusional. And if you think you can destroy this family with your paranoid fantasies, you're mistaken. He stood up abruptly, throwing his napkin on the table. Patricia, we're leaving. Felix, if you ever contact us again with these accusations, we will pursue legal action against you for slander and harassment. Actually, I said, standing as well, I think you'll find that truth is a defense against slander charges. As my parents stormed out of the restaurant, I saw Danny rise from his table across the room. In the parking lot, Detective Rodriguez and her team would be preparing to make their arrests, but I didn't feel the satisfaction I had expected. Instead, I felt a profound sadness for the family we could have been if my parents had chosen love over greed, if they had valued their children as individuals rather than as investments to be optimized. The confrontation was over, but the real work of healing was just beginning. 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse hallway watching my parents being led away in handcuffs after their sentencing. Gerald received 8 years in federal prison for wire fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. Patricia got 6 years for real estate fraud and conspiracy. They would also be required to pay full restitution to all their victims, including the $47,000 they had stolen from me over the years. The trial had been difficult, but cathartic. 12 elderly victims testified about how my parents had manipulated them into bad financial decisions. The forensic accountants had traced the money trail, showing systematic fraud going back almost a decade. Danny's testimony about our family dynamics had been particularly powerful, as he described the psychological manipulation tactics our parents used to maintain control. Most importantly, the investigation into Emma's death had been reopened. While the physical evidence was inconclusive after 3 years, the documentation she had left behind, combined with the pattern of abuse revealed in the trial, led to her case being reclassified as suspicious rather than accidental. It wasn't the full justice she deserved, but it was acknowledgement that her death hadn't been simply bad luck. Danny had graduated from law school, despite our parents' threats to destroy his career. In fact, his willingness to testify against them had impressed several law firms who valued integrity over family connections. He accepted a position with a firm specializing in elder abuse and consumer protection law, turning his education into a tool for helping people like the ones our parents had victimized. My graphic design business had flourished once my parents stopped sabotaging it. Without their interference, my client base grew rapidly through word-of-mouth referrals. Within 4 months, I had moved into a real office space and hired my first employee, a recent art school graduate named Sarah, who specialized in digital marketing. The financial restitution from my parents, combined with my business success, allowed me to buy a small house in a neighborhood I actually wanted to live in. For the first time in my adult life, I had my own space that truly belonged to me, with no one able to use rent payments as a tool for control. Danny and I had developed the close relationship we should have had all along. We met for dinner every Sunday, sometimes with Marcus and Sarah, sometimes just the two of us. We talked about Emma often, sharing memories of her kindness and intelligence, honoring the sister we had lost and the warnings we had failed to heed. The therapy Dr. Williams had recommended proved essential for processing years of psychological manipulation. Learning to recognize gaslighting tactics, understanding how financial abuse works, and rebuilding my sense of self-worth required professional guidance. The sessions were difficult but transformative, helping me understand that my parents' treatment of me reflected their character, not my value as a person. The most unexpected development came 2 years after the trial, when I received a letter from my mother in prison. She had been attending counseling sessions as part of her rehabilitation program and wanted to acknowledge the harm she and Gerald had caused. "Felix," she wrote, "I know that sorry is not enough for what we did to you, Danny and Emma. The counselor has been helping me understand that what we called investing in the family's future was actually systematic abuse of our own children. I destroyed my relationship with all 3 of you, because I was more concerned with appearances and status than with love and support. I cannot undo the damage we caused, but I want you to know that I understand now how wrong we were. Gerald still refuses to participate in counseling and blames everyone else for our situation, but I have been forced to confront the truth about our behavior. We were supposed to protect you, and instead we exploited you. I know you have no reason to forgive me, and I am not asking for that. I just wanted you to know that our crimes were not your fault, and the success you have achieved since our arrest proves what you were capable of all along when you weren't being sabotaged." I showed the letter to Dr. Williams during our session. "How does reading this make you feel?" she asked. "Sad," I said honestly. Sad for what our family could have been if she had been capable of this level of self-awareness years ago. Sad for Emma, who died before she could see them face consequences, but also relieved to have acknowledgement that I wasn't crazy or ungrateful. They really were systematically abusing us. "Are you considering responding to her letter?" I thought about it for a long moment. Maybe eventually. But not yet. I need more time to heal before I can engage with her attempts to make amends. Dr. Williams nodded approvingly. "Healing happens on your timeline, not theirs." Today, 4 years after that terrible night when I nearly bled to death in my parents' basement, my life looks completely different. My design business employs 6 people and has won several regional awards for our work with small businesses and nonprofit organizations. Danny has become a partner in his law firm and has successfully prosecuted dozens of elder abuse cases. We both volunteer with organizations that help families affected by financial exploitation. Most importantly, I have learned to trust my own judgment and value my own worth, independent of others' validation. The family I have built with Danny, Marcus, Sarah, and my other chosen family members is based on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine care for each other's well-being. The scars from my childhood trauma will always be part of me, but they no longer define my future. I have learned that healing is possible, that toxic family patterns can be broken, and that choosing to fight for justice, even against your own parents, can be an act of love for yourself and protection for others. Emma's journal sits on my bookshelf now, not as a monument to abuse, but as a reminder of her courage in documenting the truth, even when no one was listening. Her words helped bring our parents to justice and prevent them from harming other families. In death, she achieved the justice she had been seeking in life. If you've made it to the end of my story, I want you to know that financial abuse and family manipulation are more common than most people realize. If you recognize your own situation in what I've described, please know that you're not alone, and help is available. Trust your instincts about what feels wrong. Document everything you can, and reach out to professionals who understand these dynamics. What experiences have you had with family members who prioritized some children over others? How did you handle situations where family loyalty conflicted with personal safety? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about overcoming family trauma and finding justice. Sharing these stories helps other people recognize that they deserve better treatment and that healing is possible. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it brings you some measure of hope if you're facing similar challenges in your own life. Remember that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, and sometimes fighting back is the most loving thing you can do for yourself.